Okay, I will be starting. Thank you so much.
Okay. Um, okay, rolling. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today for the first in what may be a series of discussions about our water and the future of our island here on Oahu. My name is Wayne Tanaka. I'm the executive director of the Sierra Club of Hawaiʻi. I have the extreme privilege to host today's panel, which will focus on what's called the Water Alliance Initiative, and really what it's going to take to clean up our Aina, our lands and buy our precious water that's been contaminated by the Red Hill Field Facility. And as a quick background, as you all likely know, our once incredibly abundant and pure groundwater aquifer, the primary drinking water source for Oahu has now been contaminated by the Red Hill Field Facility after years of community and Honolulu Board of Water Supply concerns were ignored and downplayed. And now we have about 5,000 gallons of jet fuel and other potential contaminants such as forever chemicals, de-icing agent, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, simple green, who knows what else in this sole source aquifer, and potentially up to 2 million gallons of fuel and oil that may have also been released from this Red Hill facility over the last 80 years. And so really the people of Oahu, everyone here, we must contend with the long journey towards mitigating the harms from this contamination plume, and to clean up this mess that we're stuck in, which will unfortunately take decades. So today we will hear from key community leaders who can help us begin to understand what the road ahead may have in store for us and what we should be focused on to ensure that our island is healed to the greatest extent possible, because really that's what we need to do to give our children, our grandchildren, future generations the best chance for a hopeful future, notwithstanding the poison that's now spreading in our precious life. And so I just like to quickly introduce our speakers. Our first speaker today is Ernie Lau. Ernie is the 10th Chief Engineer of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. He is responsible for the management and direction of the board and its staff, whose mission is to provide a dependable and safe water supply for the million or so people who call Oahu home, as well as the millions of visitors that come to our island every year. He's been a strident advocate, as many of you know, and really a lone voice of reason within any level of government, with some exceptions. In the years leading up to the current Red Hill crisis, he's warned us all about the dangers the facility posed to our drinking water and to everything that depends on it. And since the November 2021 spill, Ernie and his teams, their quick thinking, their watchful eyes, their steady, consistent presence has kept all of us informed, has kept us calm, kept us safe and aware of the gravity and the status of the situation with our aquifer and with our water system. Even as they navigate on their end the uncertainties and really unprecedented challenges that we're now facing in ensuring that we continue to have access to clean drinking water. Ernie, his leadership has also continued via his involvement with the Water Alliance Initiative, which we'll learn about in a moment. As well as his ongoing work in advocacy for transparency, for data, for accountability from the federal government. And so I just want to thank you, Ernie, so much for joining us today. We're also grateful for all that you've done and do to protect the water in our island. This gratitude is shared by so many people. And I was thinking maybe just to have a fun little exercise. If anyone has or has seen a We Heart Ernie Lau bumper sticker, put like a heart or a thumbs up in the reaction. Yeah, and so thank you, Ernie. Our second speaker is a surprise guest. Mr. George Lujan is the executive director of the Southwest Organizing Project, which is an organization founded in 1980 by young activists of color to empower communities, particularly low-income communities of color, to realize racial and gender equality, social and economic justice, and community control over land and resources. George, has been a lifelong learner and practitioner of social justice values and practices. His father, Joaquin Lujan, was an organizer and founder of the Southwest Organizing Project's Feeding the Hood program. And he first joined the organization as staff in 2008 after having worked in community gardens and youth projects and doing lots of cool and amazing things. And he spent the last 10 years building the Southwest Organizing Project's social media platforms and its campaign strategies. And he's also intimately familiar with the Kirtland-based contamination situation in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which we'll also be learning about tonight. So George, thank you so much for joining us, especially at such a late hour. And I know you're zooming in from the continent. And finally, last but not least, is Ashely Nishihara. Ashely is a longtime member and community representative of the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee, or FTAC, which was actually established by the state legislature after the 2014 leak, and which that should have been the last wake-up call we needed about the danger of the Red Hill facility. But I digress. Ashely is born and raised in the island of Oahu. She's grown up in the Salt Lake Moanalo area, so Kapukaki or the Red Hill is in her backyard. And she was appointed to the FTAC in 2021 after learning about the Red Hill facility in 2019. And Ashely has been a strident and critical voice on the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee, ever since her appointment. She's one of the few members who ask the important questions, the critical questions that even government representatives have not been able or willing to raise. And she is, she is a beacon of light in those meetings, along with Ernie and Dr. Lau, who also represents the community. And apart from FTAC, Ashely is also a member of Protect Our Aquifer, which is an advocacy group has been sounding alarm about Red Hill since well before the 2021 crisis began. So thank you so much, Ashely, for being with us today and to share your insights and for all of your work on the FTAC and in the community. So I have, I did want to, before we get into this discussion, I want to note that we do have some time reserved for questions at the end. So if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to type them into the Q&A section. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And I've spoken way too much and too long, so let's get into it. So the first question I have is for you, Ernie, and thank you again for being with us. Could you take a moment and tell us about this Water Alliance initiative? Why was it formed? What's its purpose, and what is your role on this initiative?
So the WAI or WAI Water Alliance Initiative was kind of the brainchild, I think, of leadership at the state legislature. I just want to acknowledge, Representative Linda Ichiyama, who played a crucial role in chairing the committee over many months to develop the report, the final report with recommendations. It started off with something that caught me by surprise because I've been on this Red Hill issue since 2014, but you had all levels of government in Hawaii come together, from the governor all the way down to the legislature, the leadership, president of the Senate, the speaker of the House, different members of both chambers signing on to the effort. Then you also had the mayor and the city council, the mayor and the city council chair signing on. And I happen to be one of the only government bureaucrats as the manager for the Board of Water Supply. But so you had from the state level to the city level and into government agencies, including the chair of the DLNR, the head of the Department of Health, all signing aboard to take a position in protection of our water and restoration of our water resources. And they culminated many months of efforts with a WAI report, which covers the areas of basically we in Hawaii, these water resources are public trust resources. They're not owned by private individuals or the federal government or even the state government. They're held in trust for the people of Hawaii. So this is fundamentally different from some of the continental water law principles. It also talked, I think, through this effort, our best estimates of leakage from this or spills from this facility which has been in existence since 1943 to just recently that the leaks may have been in the order of 64 to almost 644,000 to maybe 2 million gallons of releases of fuels of various types over its 80-year history. And we don't actually know for sure how much is leaked or spilled from the tanks or pipelines. And folks, remember, this facility could hold as much as 250 million gallons in these massive underground storage tanks, whose the bottoms of these tanks are only 100 feet above our sole source drinking water aquifer in the area. The other parts of the WAI report was very important, the need for more monitoring and testing, and the position that natural attenuation, you'll hear people, the agencies or regulators, or even the Department of Defense say that, oh, the natural microbes or bacteria in the rock, in the groundwater, in the aquifer will actually break down fuel over time. But we don't think that's going to be effective. So now just natural attenuation or biodegradation is not going to be enough to clean up this mess. And there's a need for a lot more monitor wells to be dug in this area. We only have maybe 35 to 40 monitor wells drilled by the military right now. And we're working on a few from the Board of Water Supply, but that's far less than what we need. When we estimate that we might need 140 or more different monitor wells to be able to properly characterize what's happening deep underground in the volcanic rock in our aquifer, and what kind of contamination might be where it might be flowing. There's no definitive evidence or information to define clearly a plume or plumes of contaminants moving with the groundwater. There's a lot more unknowns than knowns right now. And the need for remediation research in that area, maybe working with the University of Hawaii. Also the issue of tracking public health impacts, because in our situation in 2021, the military actually poisoned about 93,000 of their own people that live on Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. So this is actually on the scale of Flint, Michigan, which is a population of about 100,000 people in that community. So we had a little over 90,000 folks that were impacted by contaminated drinking water where they lived or worked on the base. So the need for continued public health monitoring and focus on that area. And then also, you know, how do we coordinate policy at the state and federal level to address this issue? And how do we keep people engaged, the community engaged? Because this issue of Red Hill facility that's over 80 years old right now, it's going to be for sure that we're going to be dealing with this problem for decades and decades to come, generations after generations. So how do we keep people engaged and educated so that we don't forget that the military needs to be held accountable to clean up the mess they've created and to make our community and our public trust resource whole. There's also the issue of indemnification and liability. You know, we should not be held liable for what the military has done here, and they should maintain liability for this. And we should be indemnified against liability, including private landowners, because this contaminant plume is moving off the Navy property at Red Hill, and it's migrating who knows where, into Halawa Valley or into Mauna Loa Valley, under private property owners. So those property owners really should not be held liable for the contamination they did not create. So just a little bit of that. Sorry, Wayne, I went on a little too long. I'll just stop there.
No, Ernie, that was very illuminating and depressing. I just kind of uplift, a few things that you noted. You know, apart from the 21,000 gallons that were released in November, you know, I think you mentioned between 600,000 to 2 million gallons of fuel and other, you know, and oil and so forth may have been released over the last 80 years, which seems like a lot. But if there's, you know, this facility could hold up to 225 million gallons of fuel at any one time, that's just like, what's less than the percent, right? So I guess one question I have is, you know, what does it mean for us for us or for future generations, if we're not able to track this contamination, much as clean it up, like, what kinds of impacts could we be looking at?
So if we cannot understand what's happening deep underground in the aquifer, like what is the contamination? First of all, is it petroleum based? Is it PFAS? Is it other types of chemicals that could have been used or stored at Red Hill? If we can't determine where it might be flowing and where these plumes might be, then we're going to have to be totally reacting to the situation, much like we are now. We shut down 3 wells shortly after the November 21 spill, and by December we'd shut down 3 wells as a precaution, our Halava Shaft, Halava wells, and Ia wells. And just recently we started to detect PAH, or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which we think, although some would disagree with us and say that it would be due to combustion or pyrogenic, we think it also has petrogenic origins, maybe connected to the Red Hill facility. And I'm not convinced that it didn't originate from there, although I don't have any final proof on that. So we're going to have to deal with these contaminants suddenly showing up at our wells. And then what do we do when we find them? And then what the impact is going to be. We don't know how far west from the facility it might be traveling, and west of the Red Hill, Navy's Red Hill fuel tanks is a vast number of BWS wells that serve our community in the Ia Halava area, and also all the way in the Honolulu water system, all the way out to East Honolulu and Hawaii Kai.
Oh, thank you, Ernie. Yeah, it's so hard just to wrap your head around the gravity of what we're facing. Like our we've taken this blessing like for granted for so long of clean, pure, abundant water.
And unfortunately, prevention of contamination is always the best approach. Preventing the contaminants and getting into the environment is the best approach, because after it's in the environment, then you're reacting. And if you have to install treatment systems or put new wells someplace else further away, those efforts and those costs, get borne by the community, unfortunately.
Thank you, Ernie. Yeah, I mean, the Water Alliance Initiative has definitely filled its plate with things to keep track of and with its vision. I do want to express, my appreciation, my deep appreciation for the leadership and coordination that went into pulling this group together and getting this, unprecedented statement and commitment from various government leaders to deal with the situation. And so hopefully, as we continue talking, we'll learn more and be able to think about more how we can support this vision from the Water Alliance Initiative and ensure that that future leaders continue to uphold this commitment that the WAI has embodied, especially as we push remediation in the next, I guess, few decades, right, or generations potentially. So yeah, thank you so much for that leadership. And so George, just again, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I know it's pretty late where you are at, so, and just again, I think you have so much valuable information to share. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Kirtland fuel leaks. What happens, what is happening now, and what you think the future holds for the water and for the affected or potentially affected communities out there in Albuquerque.
Thank you, Wayne, and the other panelists. I'm so honored to be here, Ernie and Ashely, and everybody there. I just want to say that right away. Good evening from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I am. I really appreciate the invitation from Shutdown Red Hill Coalition, Patty, and everyone that's here. It's really lifted my spirit to hear about this work, even though, like you said, it is so heavy and everything. So I really appreciate this opportunity to learn about your community, your homes, your families, and the fights that you have there. And really just I just had to say, Ernie said it kind of briefly, but what is our responsibility or obligation to clean up what the U.S. military has done to our community? And that was really like a heavy statement, actually. You know, it really had me reflecting on it. How could you ever even start to quantify what the U.S. military has done to our communities, and the fact that it falls on our families to do it, the people that came before us, you know, the fights that they had, and our little kids and grandkids, you know, they're coming up learning about it. And it's a lot to think about, but just to say that I really hope connecting with us in New Mexico and Albuquerque, hearing about that work, makes you all know that, you know, we really care about what you all are going through, and that it kind of, you know, lifts you up as well. It makes you feel good about the work. So again, I'm really honored to be here. And yeah, that US military, man, they're bad. So the Kirtland jet fuel spill that we have here started, it was really a slow leak over several decades that started in the 1950s, which was even before regulations on jet fuel were at the same level that they would reach in the decades to come. So it's really nasty stuff. And it leaked for as long as 40, 50 years. It first became public in the 90s, but we don't know when. The military knew probably pretty soon after it started, because they have to account for all of their precious materials. Um, and then the idea then would be that would be when they figured it out, but we don't know when the leaking actually stopped either. And there are a lot of similarities, I think, between the campaign that you all have and what we've been doing here. And it was really exciting to hear that you're so far along in your analysis around what do real solutions look like, which is really um, federal law and state law, and building the political will. So, you know, all the community organizers out there, getting the community behind you is really how you generate political will. They only really, you know, get behind the things that they feel there's enough support to do. And it really looks like you have a lot of support from the community. So I think that that's really great. And that then, as you're building what those solutions are, that they're really actionable, measurable, enforceable measures. So what is the timeline for cleanup? What are the benchmarks that people are going to hit? And then what is the consequence if we don't hit it? You know, how is there true accountability that includes community oversight to make sure that those benchmarks are reached? And I know that you all have put a lot of thought into that, and I think that's really important. And that, to me, I think it's important that everyone is sharing a slice of the responsibility, and the blame being, you know, the Navy, the state environment department, the state legislature, the municipalities, like city government. Everyone needs to feel a little bit of the heat and the pressure, I think, so that you have that long-term solution. Something we talk about in campaign work related to an institution as large as the military is that they can really outlast you. You know, they can kind of kick the can down the road until, honestly, all of us are not on the earth anymore, you know. So that's something that the US military can do. They're big enough and rich enough and powerful enough, and we can't do that. So really forcing those solutions and that timeline, that it happens soon. And that, you know, the next administration is still going to be on the hook for whatever may come. So there's been a lot of lip service in ours, and we really don't need lip service. And I really appreciated, you know, the question about why should we involve the Navy. I'm like, yeah, it's a pretty good question. Why should you involve the Navy? You have to be very careful when including them in any of what you're doing, because um, if you're going to pursue these other avenues, then maybe you really don't need Navy buy-in, or maybe you do. So, you know, your organizers can decide that. And when you have your community meetings, you can talk about that. But from our experience in Albuquerque, we really had to wrestle away the structure of community meetings for here, it's the Air Force. Because they hold these meetings where they set the agenda and they present their own experts and their own data, and you sign a little sign-in sheet, and at the end of it, they get to say, well, we had a community meeting, we did all these things, and we kind of manufactured some buy-in on our solution, and it's really not acceptable. So we don't need all that. We can develop our own community-led solutions, and then we compel our representatives to do their job and represent us. And I think it's really important to think of it in that way. And then pretty soon they're going to be calling you. You don't have to go to their meeting. They're going to be like, oh my God, because there's finally something really that's happening. So it seems to me from my not great a new understanding of your fight that there is some political will. You do have some political champions maybe that you can work with, and that's really good. But for us, we also have had a lot of progressive politicians not follow through on their commitments around this issue. And so again, you need the law on your side. It would be great to have an EPA that had the ability to enforce some of these things. For us in the realm of environmental justice, we're worried about the outcome of the Chevron doctrine decision that came from the Supreme Court, and what does that mean for enforceability of a lot of these things. So I'm looking forward to future communication between our communities to kind of talk through some of that stuff. I think that would be really interesting. And again, just to say that I really feel that we feel that we continue to be a military colony of the United States. So although we achieved statehood for whatever good that was, when we look around our community, we can still see the outlines of the US empire and how it affects our community. And I see that's what is happening in Hawaii as well. And I really feel connected to your fight that's there. And I think if you're not right there living it, people don't really understand that we live in a place that has extractive industry that takes everything away from us. And what we're given is this tourism industry. It's the same way in New Mexico. That's really like the only way you're going to make money. You can go down south and work in the oil fields. You can get into the entertainment and tourism industry. How else are you going to really survive? Because that's what we've been left with kind of. So I just want to say that there's that shared struggle there, and I really think this fight isn't about these individual cleanups, but really how do we defeat this like endless hunger of militarization that comes from the United States and what it's done to us. So I had to get that in there before like you cut me off and maybe said no, we're not allowed, but it sounds like I'm allowed to say that. So thank you for letting me say that. And then a more specific thing is that like you said, they endlessly want to study the problem and measure the problem and collect data. And it's just absolutely endless and really getting over the hump. And it sounds like you're there too. So like we have the same thing, monitoring wells. They just want to drill more monitoring wells. And we're like, okay, but we need remediation and cleanup wells. And no, we don't think the microbes are going to eat it. We think you need to get there and clean it out before it really gets into the water aquifer. So that's also what we're dealing with here. And then it's a cottage industry. So then other groups get to come in and study it, get a big contract. University students can come and write a paper about it and things like that. So busting a hole in that whole bubble of the whole thing and say, no, we are demanding this, by this certain time. And so I'm really, again, like uplifted to hear about your fight, and I'll leave it there for now. But if you have any questions, let me know. I'm really excited to hear more about the fight that y'all have for this Red Hill.
Yeah, I just want to I have like chicken skin. I don't know if you have veteran on the continent, but like just the amount of similarities and resonance. The military's long game, the need for enforceable benchmarks and the need for regulator support and intervention, and the long-term commitment that we need from policymakers, and the role of the community, and which has really been what's I think gotten us this far in addressing the situation we're in. And I can already sense some really important lessons learned that and challenges that we're probably going to face in the next several decades or generations. So thank you so much for sharing, George. Ernie, I did want to ask, so my understanding is that you also have traveled to Kirtland to kind of study, their situation, and in fact, well before this November 2021 crisis. I was wondering if you could share, why you went to New Mexico, like what you learned, and what are some takeaways that you have for both the WAI and the community at large.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. And George, wow, chicken skin. You just hit it right on the money, right out of the park. Back in 2014, that's our first exposure to this whole Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility and its history of spills and leaks. So we decided, my compatriot on this was Erwin Kawata, who's my current deputy manager. And we thought, what better way to understand how to deal with something we've never dealt with than actually look on the continent at other locations to see how those communities responded, what worked, what didn't work. So we came across Kirtland Air Force Base leak of maybe 24 million gallons over its history and the impact on its on the groundwater aquifer there. So we decided to go to Kirtland. I think it was to Albuquerque around early 2015 or so, and had a chance to sit down with the water utility folks. Rick Sheen, who's now with NMED, I think the environmental department was with the utility then. He was very gracious in taking us around. We also met with the chairperson of the board or commission for the water authority. I forgot her name, but she was very helpful and open, and had a chance to meet with the regulators and also the congressional delegation staff for New Mexico at the time. And at that time, I think your current governor was actually in Congress then. Was it Michelle Lujan Lujan Grisham? I'm sorry. And she was an advocate to hold the Air Force
No
accountable.
relation.
No relation. I wanted to ask you that question. But
There's a lot of us out here, so, but no, I'm with the good ones.
okay. But it was a chance to learn lessons from elsewhere, to see what we came away was if we didn't press hard early enough, this thing could drag on for a long time. And like you said, I even attended one of those community meetings put on by the Air Force, kind of a dog and pony show for the community to make everybody feel good, like what they're doing right now, these open houses. We also went to New York to Long Island to talk to a utility manager there about their experiences. And in New York, it was a little different. It was the regulator was not willing to push the Navy around and Northrop Grumman aircraft facility. So the state legislature actually passed a law that required them, forced the state regulator to take an action there. So it's a little different in each community, but became clear to us that unless there was a big push early on, this thing could easily go on for decades and decades and decades. So Wayne, that was the idea. The idea is to go look and learn from others that have gone before us.
I have to say, like, to come up with what you just said, that you know, when she was running for the governor's office, Michelle Lujan Grisham, she had a whole part of the commercial where she's on rollerblades and she says, I did all these things and I cleaned up the Kirtland fuel spill, and then skates away on rollerblades. And we're at home, we see the commercial, like, I'm sorry, we missed something, you know? And so just to say, like, the political will and all that, it kind of feels real in the room sometimes and on the thing. But then in the end of the day, your community is just there with exactly the same situation that you had when the whole thing started, and a bunch of people made a career off of you, you know, and wrote a book, or they ran for the next position, you know. And I know it gets so frustrating in our community, what they always do. So, and I feel like I'm one of those guys, like I just like parachuted in, and I'm gonna go tell all my guys, you know, I was on a Zoom in Hawaii last night. So I don't want to be like that. I want to be helpful, but that was, I wanted to share that story.
No, George, you know, you bring up a really good point here, because at the end of the day, you know, this chain of effort by the community, the elected officials, the regulators, the state government entities, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And at any moment that could easily change. The political winds could change. Those that are in leadership positions maybe leave or move on to other positions or other careers. And then we lose some momentum that we've been building. And I think we're kind of at that point. I kind of sense it, that we're we had some good momentum going, but are we going to lose it now with changes in political agendas?
to answer the question about the Chevron doctrine, and I'm not the right guy. I'm not New Mexico's Ernie Lau, or Wayne Tanaka or Ashely. I am more the hype man, so I can't tell you like the exact numbers, and I can't give you a legal analysis about the Chevron doctrine. But like you say, these political winds of change, the Supreme Court changed, and we got a slew of horrible Supreme Court decisions that reversed these legal precedents that had stood for decades, and that included that Chevron doctrine. And so I can't give you, but so basically it limited the federal ability to regulate and to enact certain things or to overrule a state or a local decision. And it was denounced by environmental justice groups all over the country, and rightfully so. And so it limits the EPA's power. So again, you know, that was like a big part of our strategy was EPA process. And even there, now they have an Office of Equity and some, you know, diversity, something like that, you know, but it went nowhere. And now all of a sudden, after all these years, they have less power than they ever had. And we're right back there again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you, George. Yeah, we had one candidate for office claim that they had called for Red Hill to be shut down, and it was shut down, and this was like in before the 2022 election. So that was, yeah, we were kind of like, what's what? Anyway, uh, um, so Ashely, I'm, you know, again, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad for all that you've done. You have, yeah, like we cheer you on when you're actually asking the questions. Yes. But I guess as a member of the FTAC, can you share a little bit about this fuel tank advisory committee? You know, what it is, what it's in, you know, what's its intent or purpose?
Okay, well, thank you, Wayne, first of all, and I'm so grateful for everybody who's here. You know, words can't express how grateful I am for all of you and your effort and your dedication, your commitment. And I'm just Jane Doe with the cat hat. And so anyway, the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee is kind of led or run by the DOH, and the meetings are actually a biannual event. It's a platform and also a unique opportunity for the public to see multiple agencies simultaneously. So that means the Navy, the DOH, EPA, Ernie representing BWS, Board of Water Supply, and a couple of community members, of which I am one, and Dr. Melanie Lau. She's not here to kick me, so Dr. Melanie Lau is the other community member. And you know, basically, I think what makes the FTAC kind of unique and a valuable kind of opportunity to learn is the public is updated on what the regulatory agencies and the Navy have been up to since the last meeting. But more importantly, the public gets to witness how these agencies and individuals interact with each other, which provides hidden context for the information presented. So for example, if the Navy is presenting a piece of dodgy or questionable information that they don't want to explain or to go into further detail with, they'll usually attempt to deflect the question by saying one of the following statements. A, that's classified. B, that's a question for somebody higher in the chain of command. Or C, we are waiting for X, and then you can fill in the blank, the regulatory agencies to give us the go-ahead, or BWS, or etc. to clear this, and you should ask them. And that was actually the answer that I was given at the last open house event that the Navy had. So at which point, when they do that, the DOH passes the hot potato back into their court by saying, we're waiting on the final draft from the Navy regarding that matter, or we do not have the answer at this time. That's their favorite go-to. So I wanted to actually go into what the FTAC, now that I've kind of explained what the FTAC is, I want to explain what it is not. Because people have come up to me with a variety of expressions ranging from kind of confusion and curiosity. So what do you guys do? To spite and blame. So what do you guys do? You know, and I'm here to tell you that well, whenever I'm asked that question, I really have to hold my tongue, because what I really want to say is, well, you know, I get up in the morning and I brush my teeth and I eat breakfast and I get, you know, get dressed, get ready, whatever, and then I go to the meeting. That's what we do. I mean, so the FTAC is not the Avengers. We do not go into the streets at night and kick evildoers' butts, although that would be cool. And B, we're not Congress or Parliament. So contrary to popular belief, we don't actually meet outside of the biannual meetings or pass laws of any sort. So what you see in each meeting is literally what you get, and that's all that you get. So we do not meet in secret and sit there in white curly wigs, passing each other cucumber sandwiches, mulling over which resolutions to bring up to city council. You know what I mean? So, you know, because I know that some people hidden in their question of what do you actually do, they have this hidden assumption that, well, you hold all the power, you're part of the FTAC committee, why don't you do something? Why don't you do something to help us? And that's what I wanted to really kind of address. So whenever I can't speak for Ernie and I can't speak for Dr. Lau, but what I can say is on my end, in addition to waking up on the day, getting dressed and blah, blah, for a week prior to the event, I am cramming madly, trying to, like, I'm preparing for this huge test. Like, I'm just like getting up to date on all of the, you know, what happened since the last meeting, you know, look at all the articles on Civil Beat, look at Wayne, your speaking points, you know, like what you know you want to cover in that. I look at everything and anything that's available to me. And then I also look at the presentation slides that are up on the DOH's website of what each agency is going to present. So like DOH, EPA, the Navy, and I write down notes based on like, okay, these are the questions that I want to ask. So that's what I basically do. So mad cram study, and then on that day I just like do the best I can to prepare, and then I just go off to, and after each meet, that's it for 6 more months. So you know, basically I just want to give like not just a shout out, but just kind of like just second what Ernie said and George said about community involvement, because I really think that, you know, I have no idea about politics, and you know, I'm the gal that, you know, I don't watch the news. I hear about the really important events like offhand or by mistake or by somebody saying something. But you know, when this happened, I just want to give a little background of how I got into this whole you know this whole issue. You know, when my family got the letter about Red Hill from Board of Water Supply in 2019, written by Ernie, you know, it was a cry for help. And that's how we saw it, as in it is a cry for help. And just like most people, you know, I was hesitant to respond or get involved at first, but after discussing the issue with my family, you know, the gravity of the situation started to sink in. And just like many others thought when the 2014 spill happened, I thought, wait, didn't the military and Department of Health take care of this already? Why am I hearing about this again? And from the Board of Water Supply, of all people, you know, can't they do something about this? And so when I attended my first public meeting in 2019, that's when the full weight of the situation sunk in. So I found out then that the people who were supposed to be looking out for us were not only not looking out for us, but actively laughing in our faces. So when I went up to the podium to give my first ever testimony, a group of Navy soldiers stood to the side, snickering and sneering and pointing at me. And my mom gave them this really murderous mama bear glare, you know, which shut them up right away, you know. But that did it. That was the moment that I knew that if I and many others in my community didn't try to do something, our fate was up in the air. So basically my mom's friend also attended that meeting. Her name is Lois Berger. And she suggested, hey, why don't you, me, and your mom, why don't we make protect our aquifer, you know, like just a group of, you know, we can just have a website on, you know, online just to share like whatever news is put up about this, you know, about Red Hill, and keep people up to date. And, you know, we just before the pandemic hit, we were hitting IAEA Public Library, you know, with our, you know, how the Navy has their open houses with the science fair boards and all that stuff. We had our own science fair boards cleared by the Board of Water Supply. We were looking to Ernie and Erwin for like, you know, fact checking and we got their slides and everything like that, except all the information was divided amongst 3 people. So we were literally giving like free seminars to everybody who would, drop by and like, sign up for our mailing list. And then, I was invited actually to Waikiki Elementary School, where I talked to the entire 3rd grade class. So that's like 80 plus kids. And I'm bringing this up because, when all this stuff is happening, I'm telling my friends left and right, all my acquaintances, all my friends. And what they told me really disheartened me. And I want to share some of what I heard, because I'm sure that all of you have heard, you're in the same boat. You probably heard this before, but here's a selection of the most common ones. Why are you making this into a full-time job? It's not like you get paid for your efforts. Why don't you bug our political representatives about this and leave me alone? I did. I emailed 23 of them, got a response from 7 of them. It's nice that you found your little passion project and feel a sense of purpose. I don't need to get involved with it now because you're taking care of it for us. It's hopeless. How can you fight against the Navy? I don't get involved in politics. That isn't in my area, so I'm not affected. Doesn't affect me. Can't we just live on bottled water if something happens? What can I do? I'm just one person. And then I should tell that person that's my line. That's why I'm trying to get you involved, so that we're 2 people, and then, so on and so forth. So we're a lot of people, So I want to bring those up because, not to depress you, obviously, although that might have happened, but I want to publish this list of quotes out there somewhere. And then these are all like cognitive distortions. All right. And they are what is keeping the community from getting more involved. And if you really want an answer as to like, how can we get the community more engaged? I would say with the adults, it's kind of climbing an uphill. It's fighting an uphill battle, because you get things like this, and then people already have that filter of, even though I was their friend, they suddenly, when I told them about Red Hill, they shut down. They get, what are you trying to sell me? Even if I was their friend, you know what I mean? But when I did that seminar to the entire 3rd grade class at Waikiki Elementary, there's no filter. There's no filter. They looked at my data and they went, oh my God, that's horrible. What can we do about this? What can we do to help? What can we, this is all happening. And the kids caught on like that, and I used to teach, I used to have my own business, teaching origami to after schoolers, after school kids, after school classes. And before that, I used to teach 1st grade and kindergarten classes, after school activities. And I can tell you right off the bat, our future lies with the keiki. Okay. Because when I was a keiki, I wasn't taught how important our water is. Like, where do we get it from? We're an island. We're not like Flint, Michigan. We can't just get our water from, another river. We're an island. Where do we get it from? How do we get it? And so I taught the kids all that when I went to, Waikiki Elementary, and I told them that's how we get our water. And I showed them like a little display with ping pong balls and all that stuff, so they could visualize it. You know what I mean? And it's not enough to just have like one time in 3rd grade, this lady came to us one time and told us about, the water, where we get our water from. It has to be an ongoing thing, like continually updated. I don't know how you can get this education in the schools, but continually updated on what's happening. And I'm kind of sad that social studies was cut from schools. Am I correct? I mean, I think it was cut from schools, where you kind of look at what's happening around you and you kind of react to that and you kind of get involved, because that's where our future lies. But I know we can't wait for that, in the meantime. But in the meantime, what we can do is we can take all of these responses that I got from my former friends, and then we can put them up and kind of blast each one, one by one, and kind of address that. Now that's the tricky part, because you don't want to come across as judgmental and really angry and being in their face about it, because that'll just make them more like, Nope, nope, nope. But at the same time, you don't want to be a doormat like me and just be like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever, because then, people are just going to think you're crazy. So at best, I'm going to read the reaction here. The friends who became concerned only became concerned because they could sense my distress and they thought, oh, wow, she's really upset about this. Maybe I should do something to make her feel better about this, which completely missed the mark of why I was so upset about it. And at worst, others became suspicious and they thought I turned into this rabid dog, that I suddenly got involved in politics because it had become my lifetime passion, which is not the case at all. So the sudden change in my personality didn't tell them that something was actually wrong with the water. They thought something was wrong with me. So I think the answer, when you confront people who, I'm sure everybody has people like that in their lives. So I think the answer with that is not to be too nice, but not to be too mean, but kind of assertive and kind of telling them what's what. So for example, to my friends who asked the question, why are you making this into a full-time job? I actually blew up and lost my temper and I told them, this is our water. Without water, we can't live. What makes you think I wanted to tell everybody how to do their jobs and do their jobs for them when I'm already having a hard time myself? Because at the time, my couple of my family members were sick and I was full-time caretaker for them and they've since passed on. So what makes you think that I love to spend my time and energy sitting here and arguing with people and criticizing them for not protecting us? I just want everybody to get along. And if I don't do it, who will? They couldn't say anything to that. And so from then on, they were like, oh, we understand this is really important. How's that going? Because they used to live in Hawaii, but now they moved to California. So they always ask me now and then, like, how's that going? We heard in the news that this and this and this. So yeah, how do you make somebody care? So if you do any more than just tell somebody about the issue, you're getting in the face about it and they'll be repelled from ever having to do anything with it. But if you're too nice, nobody takes you seriously and they think you're just cuckoo. So yeah, I think the solution, as I was telling Madison earlier, was you either got to make them laugh or cry. And, nobody wants to make anybody cry. The only thing that I can think of is like, well, I'm not going to go out there and poison their water or take away their water or whatever. I mean, but, if you can get people's attention through making them laugh, they won't feel like they're being accused or whatever. But yeah, I'm sorry I don't have any like magical solutions or anything like that. But I really think the biggest thing lies with the kids. And otherwise, I think there are ways to call out people, adults in the now and engage our community now, but it is very challenging. Sorry, I went on and on like that. That's why.
Thank you, Ashely. That's very those are very insightful reflections on trying to get folks to recognize crisis, like ideally before it happens, right? Like the best prevention of contamination is the best thing.
Yeah.
When
it happens, it's like,
I do have to say, my respect for you has deepened even more. Just hearing the origin stories of the protector aquifer and doing all your homework before these FTAC meetings, that kind of explains why you always have such hard-hitting questions. It does sound like the FTAC, the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee, it's standing alone. It's probably not the vehicle for accountability or transparency, although it does provide some, I guess, as you mentioned, public interface. So I was wondering, are there things that, even with the FTAC's limited function, like are there challenges that it has encountered from your time on it, or are there ways to improve or help it do a better job?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the main challenge with the FTAC is, well, first of all, it's run by the DOH, so there's only so far that you can get with that. But in terms of like real physical challenges that we've had as a group, it is the fact that we only have biannual meetings. And Melanie, I know, has been pushing forever and ever and ever and ever to have more meetings, because the problem we were encountering a couple of meetings ago that got really bad was that we would be there for hours and hours because we were hearing all the public commentary. And if you have only like 2 meetings a year, yes, people are going to get really frustrated, angry, and lots of stuff happened in that time. So they all want to get their frustrations and opinions out there. And why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? Which is totally valid. Of course they do. But when you only have 2 meetings a year, you can't do that. Plus, for us FTAC members, we do have the floor, we do have the advantage in terms of like the amount of time that we have to go over questions. But even the FTAC members were being rushed, we only had like maybe 3 minutes, to go over each topic. And so I'm thinking, okay, this wouldn't be a problem if we just had more meetings, but they will not make more meetings. When they asked, DOH actually asked us, oh, do you guys want more meetings? And I said, yes. Lots of people said yes. Nothing happened. So yeah, if I could suggest anything, because the FTAC is pretty much, I think that's it. That's how that's the limit of its potential as far as I can go. Like the only thing that I would improve from here on out is just like have more meetings. Or just make it not run by DOH.
And we do have legislators in the audience, so maybe that can help inform some policy making. Ernie, so you're an FTAC member as well, and feel like you might have some things to add.
So yeah, thank you, Wayne. Ashely, you're amazing. You're amazing. You and your family.
You're amazing.
Thank you so much. The FTAC is, a creature created by the state legislature. It doesn't expire, as far as I can tell, but it's only this biennial meetings. And there was a bill a few sessions ago to go to at least quarterly meetings. So I think we should try to push for more frequent meetings, bi-monthly or maybe bi-monthly instead of quarterly, at least. The other thing too, and I totally agree with that, I respect the regulators and what they do. And I know that in New Mexico, there's a NMED is the regulator there, New Mexico Environment Department. And for us in the state of Hawaii, it's the Department of Health. I think the FTAC shouldn't be run by them. I would suggest, and I think there may be some legislators on this, for maybe a bill to consider putting the Board of Water Supply in charge of facilitating and supporting the FTAC efforts and, controlling the agenda and the process and what gets, because when you have the regulator there, that's a Department of Health. They really, from my perspective in the last 10 years, they seem to be somewhat protective of the military. Initially in the 2015 AOC Administrative Order and Consent, the whole idea was not to shut it down, but to actually keep it running for another 25, 35 years. So I think getting the regulator out of that role and maybe having the Board of Water Supply identified as the facilitator of the FTAC, agendas and supporting it would be a probably better move. So maybe more frequent meetings, remove the Department of Health from being in charge, total control of the FTAC and how it's run, put the Board of Water Supply, because I would like to also see that the FTAC members would generate motions and make recommendations to the legislature each session in its report, rather than just a recap of what was discussed at the meetings and everything is online as the annual report requirement. So doing something constructive.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do have to plug that. Yeah, the Department of Health, unfortunately, especially after the 2014 spill, we had to sue them twice just to get them to require the Navy to comply with the law, which is that they had to get a underground storage tank permit, which led to the contested case hearing, which the Board of Water Supply was also part of. So, I think part of the reason why I'm so fascinated by this conversation is, And as you mentioned, we're going to look at a persistent contamination issue that will be threatening our water system, our springs, our farms, our environment for decades, if not generations. And so all of this insight, this information, these lessons learned is going to be critical to our ability to get the federal government, the military to actually to deal with this mess and clean up the mess they made. So we're not giving our great grandkids, a future of poisoned water. And so, knowing that actual remediation is going to take decades, that we still don't really have, the research and development needed to, to remediate. We don't know where this plume is, which is step one in cleaning up our water. What are some important lessons that we feel like the Water Alliance Initiative and the community need to remember? And we've already mentioned some of them, but to carry forward. And I'm especially interested, since George is here, about the Kirtland situation, as well as the FTAC model and the ways that it may have been limited in securing accountability. So I guess my question.
We didn't do that. I'm like, no, we're working on it, man. Man, I got to get up tomorrow and go to work and figure this all out now. It's really hard. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate everything you're doing, Ashely. And because we can't define the success of the campaign work or anything on the processes that they set up for us that are kind of built to fail, so you kind of got to play the game a little bit, but you can also not play it or play a different game. I mean, you can always do that. And really what you're doing is building community, and that's where the power is. It's the power of community and of people that is really what's on your side, more so than any of these departments or elected officials. The community is the power. And people always want to build these campaigns that are like the silver bullet secret thing, and there is no secret thing. It's really just being together with each other and supporting each other and building the solutions together, and that's how you get there. And a lot of times we've had to step away from, like, we'll be like canvassing on a certain issue or using some tactic and step away and re-come at it in a different way. And a lot of times we'll come back and just go to where community is, not just the ones that we think are going to side with us, whatever that might be, but more just where are people, the people that we care about, whatever. And then, asking those questions of, what do you care about? What does community mean to you? What are the things you love about your community and things like that? And then, they're going to generate those answers about, it's the land, it's the people, it's the water, it's the air, it's everything else. And then, what are the things you're worried about? Things like that. What solutions would you like? Eventually you can, lead them through a process where you have all that support, because when they see the news or they read about this issue, they have all those notions already. And, you're coming at it more of in that way of building with people and build, and then they get to a place where they want to, do those things. And then that's time well spent. Time in community, building community is always time well spent. And, time spent in a meeting held by the Navy isn't always time well spent. Sometimes it's like the worst part of your whole month was being in it, so just to say that, like it can be where you think the community needs to be. Sometimes it means setting aside the campaign goals even and doing something else, and it's like you have to go have a potluck or something because that's where people need. And that's really good stuff. And I think that's why I'm excited getting, the invite, because I see all that community organizing happen. And what we learn is that we really need to rely on each other. So that's how I feel, is that I do not trust these entities. I definitely don't trust the Air Force or the U.S. Navy, and one day it could reach the aquifer, and then all of a sudden it affects the whole city, and there's going to be no accountability if that happens. No one's going to get in trouble. No one's going to do anything except our families are going to be drinking that water. And you kind of have to have, I think, that understanding. And we've had those wake up calls too, where you kind of realize, like, it was for a lot of people with Katrina, that the government, like, they'll just kind of leave you. They'll just let you suffer and die. And, you know, I know that that's terrible, but that's why we build community. That's why I reached out to you guys. I don't want that to happen to me. You know, and you know, we saw the fires in Maui. There was this expectation, oh, there's going to be this big response and the government's coming in and all this, and it just kind of doesn't happen. And then we just had that with a ton of fires, wildfires in New Mexico that just devastated these communities. And right now, some of them are waiting. There was like a $5 billion settlement, but it's 3 years on and not a penny has gone out to the community. And meanwhile, like poor folk can't do that, you know, like you can't just not like your home gets burned down. You can't just wait 5 years to get like a settlement check or whatever it is. So I know for us, you know, we also pivoted, you know, right now in southern New Mexico, they had really bad fires. It was in a more affluent area that has tourists coming from Texas and other places, but not everyone there is rich. And a lot of them don't have a second home, or that wasn't their second home. And we've gone and we started doing food distribution. So it's not really proper community organizing. It's more, this is a something that's just needed in the moment. Like these are services that we have to do. But then those are all people that are, you know, freshly radicalized, and they could be a part of developing these solutions and you know, holding these politicians accountable and bringing them in, you know, and making them a part of like what our group is. So anyway, like looking into the solution mode, you know, it's like the situation is pretty bad. Like, you know, it's just to be real, it's so bad, you know, and like you say, it's going to be decades and everything. And like, we're not going to be around to even see like that finish line, but you know, we can still feel good about the things we're doing today that are setting it up. And then issue education is something that we have to take seriously as one of our tactics, I think, because we can't rely on the local media. I don't know what the situation is there, but I know for us, basically the Air Force every 2 years will put out a little press release saying we're doing a good job, and they'll invite a photographer from the one paper in, and they'll go to snap some pics of the monitoring well, and then that they just are on that cycle. And then so when you talk to community, they're like, oh, I thought they cleaned that up. Like I saw the commercial, I thought that was good. So people get more angry once you tell them, no, it's not cleaned up. It's still right there. We could be drinking it tomorrow. We don't even know where it is. So we don't know the size of the plume, like all those things. So, you know, we can build more people. We can like grow this coalition and get them like agitated. And I'm preaching to the choir. Everyone's on the Zoom because they're excited and like ready to go and they're mad. So, but we can pull people in is what I mean, you know. And right now, like you got us now, you got SWAP on your side, you got all of New Mexico, like you're dealing with the same stuff we are. You could look into the Southwest Workers Union in San Antonio, Texas. They successfully shut down an Air Force base for like some different reasons. So, you know, it can be done, you know, and then we'll shut down the whole military, man. Like they can't take our money to keep blowing things up, you know. So we can think big like that and then take all these steps along the way to get there. But the work that you're doing is really exciting, and I'm always open for anyone that wants to reach out and ask anything about like the work that we've been doing.
Hey, George, really appreciate it. As a community organizer, I it resonates so much, you know, just meeting folks where they're at, like where their needs or issues are. I do want to give a shout out to Shut Down Red Hill Mutual Aid, as well as Trinity United Methodist Church. They have actually been doing water distributions because there's still continual concerns with contamination and people seeing sheens and getting sick. And yeah. Sorry, I think you're muted if you're, yeah.
I was ranting to my wife about how we have all these mutual aid operations everywhere that these disasters, everywhere that anything happens, because in the mutual aid, I don't know about you, but the people that work in our mutual aid coalitions they're like definitely not paid. They barely have, they're like low income people with like one like hoopty that barely runs, and they're loading toilet paper in it and like food all the time and going out in community. And that's it. You know, you'd be waiting for years to get a water bottle out of the government, but it takes us bringing it out to each other to actually like do it. So I'm mad because we got those people in our office too, and they're coming, can we borrow this? And because we're bringing it out to this community, we're bringing it up north down over here, you know. And it just gets, it's like, man, yeah, but it's exciting too. It's like, man, there's all that community love out there, and it's like cool to hear about. So I'm the same. I'm excited hearing about how many similarities with all what we're dealing with.
And maybe and this is what also resonated with me is your acknowledgement of the disproportionate burdens that these crises place on particular communities, right? Low income, like lack of access to services and so forth. And I'm wondering if you had thoughts about, as we look at trying to organize in the long term, like intergenerationally. So in addition to reaching keiki, who are, I guess the third grade 5 years ago, so they're in eighth grade now, they're coming up. Like, how important it is that we uplift folks that are, most deeply or directly impacted, whether it's, the Native Hawaiian community for whom this is, an ancestral source of life and like an ancestor, or, or like, even the military families that have been directly impacted that are struggling, health-wise and financially and in all the ways because of the, what's happened to them. I don't know if you had any thoughts, George, or anyone else.
I have so many thoughts. Now I'm re-awake. It's like 11-12 now, but I'm like, I'm ready to go. Yeah, it's so important because it's about cultural identity. They took our land. They killed scores of our ancestors. They don't let us speak our languages. They don't let us grow our food. They don't let us build and teach traditions and history and culture. But those are fights that we've been fighting a long time, and now we can do it. Like, that's why we're all still here that can talk about what those histories are. And I mean, that's like the real crime is all that degradation of what our cultures are and what they've done. You know what I mean? And that's what the next generation needs to understand too. I mean, not because there's power in that, there's strength in that. For a lot of us, community organizing is what kept us out of rough things in life. You know what I mean? Because they also pumped drugs and other things in our communities as well, so that like if they couldn't take care of the job, they would have something to like finish us off. You know what I mean? So cultural identity and a feeling of connection to your history and your culture is really important for these young people, so we have a huge youth program at SWAP, and they keep coming back year over year, and then they send their kids when they're old enough because that's the experience that they got. So, even though we just took those kids to a bunch of meetings where they get their butt kicked by the Air Force or whatever, like we didn't win, like, these are hard things, but they learned about themselves and they feel more confident. And then you hear how much, people will say negative things about their home because of the things that the US, like hyper militaristic, capitalist, misogynistic, horrible structure, what they did to us. You can counteract all that. You don't need another 500 years to counteract it. You can like bring this young person in and have a good experience being in community, and boom, you just did it right there. And now they care about where they come from. So yeah, investing in the youth is always, that's always number one. And, they are going to carry it on because we might take some more losses, like we might, but I like the plan. The plan sounds good. I actually think, you guys are pretty close to some that I want to model. I want to copy some of your ideas here. But yeah, just taking care of each other, taking care of like the young folks, making sure families are involved, so it's not just the university students. It's really good that I see all these like Native people too, because our Sierra Club is like almost 90% like white. Just to say, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of cool. And then, our plume, it's in the southeast. Yeah, okay, thanks. So our plume is in the southeast heights of Albuquerque, where it's all our people down there, you know what I mean? And if it starts migrating north, and that's why they don't want to put the wells up there. But if it gets in that affluent white neighborhood, you better believe they're going to start shutting shit down. Press conferences, the governor's going to be out there. They're going to do where they put like the boots and the coat for like the site visit in the helicopter, all that, So we know that there's these racing aspect to it. And when the young people can like learn that, they don't feel so down about their identity and their community. They feel more like, oh, okay, I have an analysis now. I don't have to feel like any shame. I can feel strong, so yeah.
Good, George. Before we go the audience Q&A, Ernie and Ashely, is there anything else you'd like to add? Maybe particularly in terms of takeaways or wishes for the Water Alliance initiative going forward. What will we need? What will the community need to do to make sure that the vision and the commitments of the initiative are fulfilled in the next few decades?
Yeah, thank you. I'll just maybe go first. Sorry, Ashely.
No.
So I think the what we have to keep in mind is the time frame for our efforts. That we're not talking about another 10 years or 20 or 30. We're talking about multiple generations, maybe, like 7 generations out. How do we sustain an effort over maybe 100 years or longer on the cleanup and remediation? So, so one area was the area that we need actually to create some type of system at the state level and state government level and state law, and also at the federal law at the federal level and congressional level and federal law that would be the hook to keep the military at the table and keep their feet to the fire, to bring resources and things that are necessary to deal with this problem. So some kind of legislation at federal and state level that'll make it difficult for anybody to forget about this effort. We want to keep it in the front of mind as long as we possibly can. And I love Ashely's point about the children, the keiki, because they become future leaders that will be occupying these key roles in the future. The mayor will be gone, the governor will be gone, but the new mayor and new governor in the future can carry on this effort if we plant those seeds in their hearts and minds today.
Ashely, would you like to add?
Yeah. Thank you, Ernie, and thank you, George. And first of all with George, I third that the chicken skin response, because our experiences are so similar. Like, it's just so eerie, so uncanny, because frankly, as you were talking, I was thinking, if it, and we've all thought this, that if the Navy hadn't poisoned their own people first, do you think they'd do anything? No. If they had poisoned us first, the regular public, me and everybody, just the general community, nobody would be doing anything. We'd still be fighting that uphill battle. So, and even then, even though they poisoned their own, their response has been sorely lacking, and that's very generous of a description to have. And and with Ernie, I agree, we need something at the state and federal level, because as he was talking about that, I was thinking of with great anger about reflecting over all of the responses that I got from our legislature, our representatives, and the time the Governor Ige, I actually pulled up an old email that I had sent to Ashely Mizuno of NPR, just kind of summarizing all the responses that I got. And I had written, finally, there is Governor Ige's response, where he posits that, quote, after reviewing our concerns, we have determined that the state of Hawaii does not have jurisdiction over the matter and would most appropriately be addressed by the federal government. He then goes on to give the contact information of Brian Schatz, Maisie Hirono, Ed Case, and Tulsi Gabbard. And so, there's no getting away from that if you make something at the state and federal level. I mean, there's no passing the buck. You have to make it very literal that you cannot pass the buck, because people will do that all day long. As George said, people will be navel gazing and data gathering until the cows come home, until the earth gets swallowed by, and our entire solar system gets swallowed by a black hole. They'll be doing that forever unless we have a strong community pushing them forward. They're still aiming for that 2045. Best you believe, 2045 is still in their minds. It never went away, So that's all I have to say, because it's like, we really need to sow the seeds for the future generations of leaders, and have it be like constantly at every level. This is what's going on with our resources, with our community, with our WAI, and tell people why it's so important. Why is it so important? If we taught people that at the beginning, if we could go back in a time machine and just, tell people at the beginning why it's so important, we wouldn't be facing this kind of apathetic response now. We wouldn't be fighting. We wouldn't even probably have this problem, to tell you the truth. So, yeah. is me stepping off my soapbox. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley. I did want to note, you know, we did, you know, Red Hill isn't the only, and the military isn't the only way that politics has played a role in, perpetuating, injustices tied to water, here in Hawaii. And did want to note that the Board of Water Supply has a very unique position in that, I think as Ernie pointed out, about 100 years ago, the territory of Hawaii decided that, because of the importance of water, that they needed some level of political independence. I'm wondering if Ernie wanted to share a little bit about that as maybe a possible one thing to think about as we move forward with the water.
Yeah, thank you. And the Water Alliance Initiative, I noticed Patty had a question there. It's a good question. Can we trust the WAI, the Water Alliance Initiative is going to protect us? I think it is, from my perspective, we're in a war, and that the arrows in our quiver, the Red Hill WAI is one arrow, not the only arrow. That we need many different solutions, because it is not going to happen with just all your eggs in one basket or one arrow in your quiver. This effort will become multiple arrows, multiple eggs in your basket. But I think it's an important part to establish law. And I point back to the creation of the Board of Water Supply back in 1929, when the territorial legislature recognized that water was important to life, and water was at risk of being wasted and destroyed, the water resources. So they took the jurisdiction of the drinking water for the city of Honolulu away from the council at the time, or the Board of Supervisors, and placed it with an independent, semi-autonomous board. Not a perfect solution, but I would just say, if it were not for the decision made 95 years ago by the territorial legislature, the Board of Water Supply's current position on Red Hill on the standing up against the Navy would not have been possible. We would have been another city agency under the mayor, directly under the mayor, and we would probably be not allowed to take such an aggressive, independent position to speak up for the resource. So those are important decisions that you don't even know you made such an important decision, because you're not even going to be around to see that happen. But nearly 100 years later, we see the net effect.
Thank you, Ernie. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. Not doing a good job of saving time for questions. But I did want to maybe ask a question of everyone. So we have one that I think folks might have some insight to, but why do you think that the regulators, like the Department of Health or even potentially the EPA, has been so protective of the U.S. military, especially as it has contaminated like lands it's occupied, which would seem to be directly under their wheelhouse and responsibility. I don't know if any folks want to reflect on what might be causing that kind of bias or difference.
I would say that because I got to get all my words in before I hope to see you guys again, but that's regulators are there to uphold the status quo, just like our government is. We're allowed to elect and transfer in, switch out politicians, but it's all meant to uphold the power structure that we're living under. So that's why I keep talking about militarization and colonization, and what those things, and all under capitalism, what they've done to our communities, because that's why all of these entities are meant to do those things. So our lawsuit made it up to the state Supreme Court, and then they dismissed it, and we believe it was with some pressure from the governor and other people. That's our belief. The EPA says they're going to help, and then they disappear. Our water authority was helpful for a while, and then a new guy came in and they were gone. So no one's going to be like allowed to help us, you know, like we have to compel it and help ourselves and like force the issue. And then to Patty's question about like, what do we do? I think you need to find some teenagers to make some TikToks about this. That's like my brilliant idea just to promote it, you know, like get it out there and get people talking about it. And I know if like this is an issue that you work a lot on over many years, you know, you see the same people at every meeting almost, you know what I mean? And those are good people and good-hearted people that you love, but you're like, where's that fresh blood and everything like that, you know? So maybe they're not even on TikTok. I don't know what they're doing out there right now, but we want those young folks talking about them of different ages, you know what I mean? Introduce it as it like I said, not like the research, but more like within community and everything that they're doing something to help promote it, you know, and then sometimes you can trigger something and get a larger story and build a little bit more pressure. So hitting up using your people power, community power to like hit them from all those different sides, because when you raise the issue and you really create it as like this like hot seat issue, all of a sudden the regulator is doing his job again. And it's like the funniest thing, right? You know what I mean? So that, you know, using your people power to compel all that political pressure and kind of to kind of hit them, you know, and then that's how you get them to do their jobs, because they're really not there to protect you. You know, they're there to uphold the status quo. Like you guys are there to protect each other.
Yeah, you know, George, that's a great idea. I love that about the TikTok idea. And you know, part of my education module that I'm thinking of, like in my head, rotating in my head as we're speaking, is maybe when they hit fourth grade. I mean, they're getting younger and younger with the with the devices now. Fourth grade or fifth grade, maybe one of the assignments can be make your own TikTok about this issue. You know.
And like, what should we build when we shut down the naval base? You know, that's like your question. What should we build? What do you think? Oh, I think we should build this. Oh, I think we should build that. Get everyone talking about what we're going to build when we shut down that naval base. And all of a sudden they're like, wait, no, the meeting was supposed to be about the trifold science lab thing or whatever, you know? And you're like, no, we're talking about what we're going to build when we shut you guys down. And I thought he had a good idea. He said basketball courts or whatever, you know, and let people have fun with it, you know, instead of just the data on the cancer expectations for the neighborhood, you know, because everyone's like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. So, you know, but we got to talk about it, but, you know, find out what people want to talk about and let them talk about it, and then move them into your solutions, because you guys have all these next steps that are so exciting.
Right. Make a visualization board. Everybody make a visualization board in class. What can we put here instead? You know? So yeah, what can we make afterwards? What are we looking forward to in the future? I think that would be a really fun assignment. Well, now I want to go back in time and make my own TikTok. I mean, I still could, but I mean, I'm not young and hip.
Someone has to teach us how to do it. I tried, now it didn't go.
Didn't go. Really? Oh.
Ernie, did you want to, you have a closing thought?
Well, you know, this is great ideas. I feel very old. I don't even know what TikTok is, but I,
Someone
you know,
got to take him, explain it after this.
yeah, Fred, you can teach me. I'll ask my daughter.
There you go.
Yeah. You know, for the upcoming session, you know, I think there was a Red Hill WAI bill that there wasn't complete agreement between the Senate and the House. So hopefully some agreement or compromise can be reached, and then something get passed. I think the other thing is maybe at the legislature, the FTAC meeting frequencies be increased to be quarterly or bi-monthly. And then also instead of having the Department of Health in charge, facilitating that, put the Board of Water Supply in charge, and add on more community members to the FTAC. I kind of envision the FTAC as being a successor to the Community Representation Initiatives, which was only a creature of the administrative consent order from the EPA for 2023. But when that gets done, then, you know, that entity may go away. And it's also controlled by the EPA. So have our state legislature show leadership in the area of creating a body that is not beholden to the Department of Health or the EPA or the Navy.
Right. The representation initiative has been fighting very hard to maintain their independence. And so, but we'll see how that shakes out. Okay, so we're at time, and I want to again take a moment to thank our panelists so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and for all that you do to take care of your community and your Aina. Thank you. And I also want to extend my deepest gratitude to Kyla Wilkinson and Madison Owens. Kyla's a law student, volunteer, Madison's organizer and aspiring law student for coordinating this event. And to Patty Choi, who inspired this panel. She's a member of the Shutdown Red Hill Coalition, and she worked so closely with Kyla and Maddie for weeks to put this together. Can you folks turn your cameras on just so everyone can see you? Hey, Kyla. Patty.
Yeah.
Yeah, the behind the scenes people doing all the extra work. I'm just a not so pretty face. And yeah, and thank you all for taking time, spending time with us this evening. Before we end, I did want to note there are a few things that you and the audience can do right now to help us on our, our journey, our quest to save our water and save our future generations from, a not great future with respect to their, life-giving resource. So first, you can send a message to your congressional representatives with just a few clicks using the link in the chat. I think Maddie will drop in there. Yeah, has dropped in. This is to support the Board of Water Supply for their request for more data from the Navy's monitoring wells, for more monitoring wells, for independent, objective third-party analyses and sampling of the monitoring well water samples. Second, you can also sign up for our Red Hill email list using the link that Maddie will also put in the chat. And you'll get action alerts. You'll have, when this recording's posted, we'll let everyone know. When the next panel occurs, we'll let you know. And so encourage you to join if you haven't already. And finally, if you want to learn more about what is happening with the drinking water well for Aiea, that's at risk of being contaminated now that we've found a detection of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons in one of the monitoring wells in the area. You can jump over to the Aiea Neighborhood Board meeting, which is taking place right now, which does have a presentation from the Board of Water Supply on its agenda. And they do take public testimony in case any of you feel so moved to urge the neighborhood board to recognize that this is really just the beginning of a very water uncertain future. And that we all need to do our part to keep the pressure on the federal government, on our policymakers or regulators to prioritize the cleaning up of the contamination that we and future generations will have to struggle with. But with that, I just again want to thank everyone, for all our panelists, for our organizers, for all of you in the audience for joining us. And yes, please have a good night and sleep well. And thank you again. Mahalo nui.
Thank you.
everyone. Water is life.
Aloha kapai.
Ole kabai, water is life. Mahalo. Nice meeting you, George.
Meeting you all.
Aloha.
Aloha.